بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله أما بعد. The author Al-Hafiz Umar ibn Ali ibn al-Mulaqin rahimahullah says the sixth subfield or subcategory والمنقطع وهو ما لم يتصل إسناده من أي وجه كان. There's a branch which is called al-munqati'. And al-munqati', the author says, it's the hadith whose isnad, or the isnad of this hadith, lam yattasil. It is inconsistent, is broken, it is not continuous. Min ayyi wajhin kan. Whatever the breaking or shatter point or breakage or severing may be, wherever it's been popped and split, it is called al-munqati', is now broken. So therefore we have a general term, all of the different words and names that we learned in al-Baquniyah, such as al-mursal, al-mu'allaq, al-mu'dal, etc. All of them fall under the general umbrella term of munqati'. Mursal is munqati'. Mu'allaq is munqati'. Mudallas is munqati'. وهكذا. Or there's one narrator missing, the entire chain missing, from the beginning, from the end, in the middle, to a more, etc. That's the generality of the term munqati'. Just like many of the ulama of the past, they use the word or the term mursal to include any type of lack of consistency or any breaking point in the isnad, in the chain of narration, metaphorically speaking, like one link being split, being ripped, being popped from the next. So therefore, this is the general usage of the term. And some of the ulama, they use the term munqati' in a specific sense to be a lack of consistency in the chain, not necessarily in the very beginning where that would be mu'allaq, nor not necessarily in the very end where that which that would be mursal, speaking about marfu' hadiths, nor pertaining to two narrators back to back being missing, which would include mu'tal. Khairan, inshallah ta'ala. What are the reasons behind a hadith being munqati'? Very simple. That is, for the adna or the tilmeeth not taking the hadith from the a'la, the above, or the sheikh, and one of the considered and acceptable ways of receiving a narration. Whether it is a sama', hearing from his sheikh or her sheikh, al-ard, al-qira'ah al-sheikh, reading to the sheikh, al-ijaza, the munawala, any way of the different types of at-tahammul, which will be explained later on. The turuq at-tahammul is the ways of receiving a hadith. I could write you a hadith, and then you take the hadith from me, you pass it on, and the isnad is muttasil, even though you didn't hear it from me, but you read it from me. Or I could hand you over my notes, and I could say, narrate these notes from me or not, or just give them to you. Al-muhim is that you took it from me. And the asl, for a beginner, the simple, easy way is we use the word as-sama', is that narrator, the student, did not necessarily hear from the sheikh, the teacher narrator. Khairan, inshallah ta'ala. So with this being said, that's with regards to the elementary breakdown of the term, with regards to al-inqita' and with regards to as-sama'. As far as the intermediate study and expert study, then there are several different ways of taking a hadith from your teacher, not just hearing it from your teacher from his mouth with your ears. Khairan, inshallah. Point number 7, the author says, wal mursal وهو قول التابعي. وإن لم يكن كبيرا قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. 7th point, he says mursal, a term that we took in Bayquniya, and here we're going to take it again with a bit more detail. He says it is whenever a tabi'i, and we explain what a tabi'i is, even if he isn't a major tabi'i, he says this is a qaid here, a restriction or a lack of restriction. The reason why the author said this is because there are some of the ulama who hold the view that the hadith of a tabi'i who is min sigar tabi'in, or is from the awsat, the tabaqat al-wusta, the middle rank, the intermediate rank of the tabi'in, if he narrates hadith from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu, then they say it's not mursal. They say it's no longer mursal. But the tabi'i has to be kabir. He has to be from the top level, a cardinal tabi'i, or from the cardinal tabi'in, from the tops, from the top, the prominent major tabi'in. They have different reasons why they say this, which we're not going to get into now. Perhaps we'll leave them for a book on the next level, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Whenever the tabi'i says qala Rasulullah, obviously the qawl is nothing more than an example, and it also includes the fi'l, or anything that took place in the Prophet ﷺ's time period. Anything from the zaman of nubuwah, it is considered to be mursal. Khairan inshaAllah. As far as the issues that pertain to the mursal hadith, is the mursal hadith a hujjah in fiqh? Can two mursal hadiths put together become a hujjah? Hasan li ghayri? Are there some mursal hadiths which are accepted? Did the ulama of Islam differ on accepting a mursal hadith before Imam Shafi'i came along? These different issues are all things that the ulama of Islam have spoken about in detail. The people of hadith in general we said, more so the fuqaha, they spoke about this in a great deal of detail. And then the ulama of hadith who came later on, who were influenced by the fuqaha heavily, they debated on this issue extensively. And there are also different madhab wars, obviously because many ahadith regarding the ahkam, the halal and haram, many of them, not all of them, are mursal. And the Hanafis want to use it, the Shafis want to use it, the Malikis want to use it, so on and so forth. Khairan inshaAllah ta'ala. The author then says in the 8th point, وَمِنْهُ مَا خَفِيَ إِرْسَالُهُ. He says in a type of mursal hadith is that which is called al-mursal al-khafi. Al-mursal al-khafi. This term is a bit new or a bit different from that which we took from al-Bayquniya. He says, وَمِنْهُ, يعني al-mursal, is that which مَا خَفِيَ إِرْسَالُهُ, is that which its irsal is khafi, is hidden, it's not apparent. So we benefit from the speech of the author, the matin, is that mursal is of two types. It's jali, and then there is khafi. The author here, the matin, he doesn't explain what's meant by mursal khafi. He doesn't say what's meant by it at all. Okay, we have in the footnotes, the mu'alliq, Sheikh Ali al-Halabi, he says, وهو الذي فيه انقطاع في أي موضع كان من السند بين راويين متعاصرين لم يلتقيا أو التقيا ولم يقع بينهما سماع. He says it is a type of inqita' in any place of the isnad, like munqati', between two narrators, only two, that were contemporaries. They lived with each other and they never met. Or they did actually meet, but they didn't, or the student, the receiver didn't hear from the giver, the one who wants to pass on the narration. Once more, they were contemporaries. They lived in the same time. But for one reason or another, they never met. Or if it's documented and proven that they met, but they never heard each other, or one never heard from the other. They never came into any type of discourse or conversation for the narration to be passed on. So the munqati' can be understood and discovered by dates, death. This person, the sheikh, he died in 2017, and this brother who's narrating from him at the age was only, or at the time, was only 2 years old. He was born in 2015. So obviously we're talking about 20, 30 years later, 50 years later, we're in the year 2067, and we have narration from A from B. He was only 2 years old when the sheikh died. So how did he hear from him? It's impossible. Or the person could have died before the person was even born, whatever the case may be. I'dal, or yani inqita, is a breakage. Here, the dates are not necessarily a factor. Death, birth is not a factor at all. Rather, they are contemporaries, is likely. But they did meet. We have that proven, that they never ever met. Or if they did meet, they did not actually converse with each other. Clear on this, inshallah ta'ala. So therefore, let's say, for example, one says, I heard this narration, or heard this point from, let's say, for example, mathalan, one says, I heard this statement, or not even says I heard, because if he says I heard, then that's a problem, but one narrates something from Sheikh bin Baz. Now, at the time, Sheikh Abdulaziz ibn Baz, rahimahullah ta'ala, was living. The person who was in Saudi Arabia. Sheikh bin Baz was in Riyadh teaching. It's documented that this brother traveled to Riyadh several times. Or let's say just one time. He lived in Medina and he went to Riyadh. But the time in which he went to the Riyadh, Sheikh bin Baz was ill in the hospital. And he wasn't seeing any students at the time. No one was allowed except for his family members. So even though he lived in the time of bin Baz, but he didn't hear from him. He never met him. Or if they actually met, let's say he saw Sheikh bin Baz in the masjid, and as the sheikh was coming to sit in his chair, he became sick and ill, and his bodyguards carried him off and they put him in a wheelchair, and he never mentioned anything verbally. So he met, mathalan. Or let's say he only had the opportunity to shake bin Baz's hands and he walked out. Or when he saw Sheikh bin Baz was offering a salah, whatever the case may be. So this is called al-mursal al-khafi. And it's obviously a type of inqita', but as it's mentioned, it's hidden. It's a finer, smaller, or a finer type of inqita'. And then obviously, this type of inqita' is not going to be picked up by everyone. Someone who's hasty, someone who's sloppy, someone who doesn't have the quote-unquote eagle eye that's necessary and that's needed for discovering ilal, the hidden defects in the hadith. And there's no doubt al-irsal al-khafi is a type of illah, khafiyya, because all of the context clues are there. What do you mean it's munqati'? They were alive at the same time. He was 30 years old, he was 33 years old, or 40, or the sheikh was 50, mathalan, 20 years older than the student. It was well known they were in Medina at the same time. It's very likely that he heard from him. He was a mujtahid, a hardworking student of knowledge, and this sheikh was generous with giving the ijazah. It's very, very likely that they met. So if you're hasty, or if you're not as meticulous, and if you're not heavily involved with history and dates and information, then it can slip from under your fingertips. And this is why the ulama of Islam, who were imams of the ilal, they lived their lives for this. All right? So one definitely needs history. History and hadith go like brown on rice. Khairan inshallah. Point 9, the author says, وَالْمُعْضَلْ وهو ما سقط من إسناده اثنان فأكثر ويسمى منقطعا أيضا فكل معضل منقطع ولا عكس. Point 9 is that which is called al-mu'dal, which we took in al-Bayquniyah. The author says, the mu'dal is the hadith in which there are إثنان فأكثر, 2 or more narrators missing. There's a gap of 2 links. And pay close attention, the author does not say ma'a tawali. He doesn't say back to back, consecutively, right back to back. It doesn't say that. He doesn't mention that shart. So the question is now, is this not a shart according to him? Is it khilaf? Or is it well known and he just iktafa bi al-ishara al-mukhtasara? He just sufficed himself with mentioning it in brief. Both are a possibility. The author then says, and this type of hadith is also called munqati', as we previously explained. He says, so therefore every hadith which is mu'dal is considered munqati', but every hadith which is munqati' is not necessarily called or considered mu'dal. Khairan inshaAllah. Point 10, the author says, وَالْمُعَلَّقُ وهو ما حذف من مبتدئ إسناده واحد فأكثر. Then we have al-mu'allaq. We have the hadith in which is called mu'allaq, which we took before as well. And it is the hadith which is missing a narrator or more, at least one, from the very beginning part of its isnad. From the beginning of its sanad, it's missing a narrator. The author of the book, the one who's taking the riwayah and spreading it, didn't hear from the one that he's quoting. He's not going to say, I heard, or Fulan told me, and he didn't hear. Obviously it's kadhib, but he's going to say qala. وَيُذْكَرْ عَنْ كَذَا وَيُذْكَرْ is mentioned that Fulan said, he said, so on and so forth. Naam, mu'allaq. This style of narration and this type of inqita' was made famous and widely practiced and used by Imam al-Bukhari in his book Al-Jami' al-Sahih and Sahih al-Bukhari. And obviously the mu'allaq hadith does not fulfill or satisfy or fall under the standard of the hadith al-musnad. And many hadiths inside Bukhari that Imam Bukhari mentions mu'allaqan or mu'allaqatan, they are mawsula. They've been mentioned with 4 chains and other parts of his book, the Sahih. And if not, then outside of his book from other ulama of hadith. Hafidh ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he wrote a book just on these narrations. Taghliq al-Ta'liq. Also mentioned them in his introduction, hadithdisciple, his tremendous introduction to his sharh of Sahih Bukhari, hadithdisciple, a book that in the first year of the College of Hadith, one of my professors advised a student of knowledge to read over and over again. Khairan inshallah ta'ala. Why would Imam al-Bukhari do this? Did Imam al-Bukhari want to cheat? Did he want to give you an incomplete isnad? Did Imam al-Bukhari not know that the sanad should be continuous, etc.? There are many reasons why Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala would make ta'liq. Okay, technical reasons. Reasons pertaining to the Sinad Hadithiyah. Okay, the different technicalities of the science of hadith. Now we all know that Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah was very, very picky. He was extremely meticulous. He had a very exquisite taste, very classy type of mind he had. And he was a perfectionist, no doubt about that. Perfectionist, no doubt about that. As if he was obsessed with perfection and with every single meticulous detail had to be the way that he wanted it to be in his book. So oftentimes he would make ta'liq of a hadith, not because hadith is weak or something wrong with it, but he just needed to do it in that way. He didn't want to repeat the hadith, he didn't have a different isnad, diq al-makhraj, whatever the case may be. We're not going to explain those technical reasons right now in this field of study. Bidnillahi ta'ala, that's going to come, inshallah, if Allah wants it for us at another time of advanced or more advanced study than this. What's important is that there are reasons of ta'liq, and there are different types of hadith inside Bukhari which are mu'allaqah. Some are inside Bukhari, as we said, with 4 chains. Some are outside with 4 chains. Some, the author, or Ibn Hajar says, I didn't find it mawsulan. And oftentimes the hadith could be sahih or it could be weak. And there's different ways of Bukhari making ta'liq. Siqatul jazm, siqatul tamrid, etc. That has to be explained in further studies. The author then says, point 12, وَالْمُعَنْعَنْ وهو ما أتي فيه بلفظة عن كفلان عن فلان وهو متصل إن لم يكن تدليس وأمكن اللقاء. Then we have the hadith which is called mu'an'an. We also took this term in Bayquniya as well. And the mu'an'an hadith, Ibn al-Mulaqqin, he says, is the hadith that is brought, that is mentioned in the way of an, i.e., in other words, it's not حدثنا وأخبرنا قرأت على فلان أنبأني فلان كتب إلي فلان. He's not mentioning how he got the narration and did he get it directly or indirectly. He doesn't mention that, but it says an, which means from, on the authority of, like this. So he says fulan an fulan, that Abdul Rahman narrated from Abdul Latif, and it does not state that Abdul Rahman heard Abdul Latif. It does not state that Abdul Rahman received correspondence from Abdul Latif. It doesn't state that, but he just says from him. He says, in the ruling of this type of hadith, listen carefully, he says it is considered to be muttasil. It's muttasil. This hadith, as if it has haddathana wa akhbarana, it's considered to be continuous. It's not a broken chain. He says with what? Two conditions. First condition is that there's no tadlis. Is that the narrator cannot be a mudallis who practiced tadlis and made tadlis of this specific hadith. Of this specific hadith. Obviously, there are many details with regards to tadlis and the people of tadlis and the types of tadlis and the differences between the different schools of thought among the ulama of hadith. What's important is to keep things brief and simple. He says as long as there's no tadlis and as long as it was possible for them to meet up, it was feasible. In other words, we don't have no proof that there's irsal khafi. We don't have no proof that a person made tadlis. All we have is ana, which is mubhama. It's dubious and vague. Abdul Rahman narrated from Abdul Latif. Did he hear from him directly? It doesn't say that, nor does it negate it. So if Abdul Rahman was a contemporary of Abdul Latif, and if Abdul Rahman wasn't known for being someone who practiced tadlis in general, nor did he make tadlis in this hadith specifically, we found another chain of narration between them is brother Ali, then the author says it's muttasil. It holds the same ruling as the hadith which says hadathana and akhbarana. Moving forward, point 12, the author says, وَالتَّدْلِيسِ وهو مكروه لأنه يوهم اللقاء والمعاصرة بقوله قال فلان وهو في الشيوخ أخف. He says tadlis. And tadlis, as we also took in Bayquniya as well, he gives a more benefit here. He says the ruling of tadlis is that it's makruh. He doesn't say it's haram, but he says it is detested. It's looked down upon. Something should be shunned. It's disliked. Shouldn't be done. But it isn't necessarily something which is absolutely impermissible. And the reason why it is, he explains, is because it gives the listener or the student or the reader a type of notion, a dubious, vague notion that the student heard the scholar and met the scholar. When he says, Qala Fulan, Abdul Rahman says, narrated from Abdul Latif. Abdul Latif said. First thing you think is Abdul Rahman heard Abdul Latif and met, but it's not necessarily the case. It doesn't affirm it or negate it, as we explained in our classes on Bayquniya. He then says, making tadlis al-shuyukh is akhaf, is not as bad. In other words, when you call your sheikh a different name, you give your sheikh a different kunya, a different last name or by name or ascription or affiliation. Now, one may say it's not as bad when you do this. Absolutely. Or one may say rather it's only not as bad when you do it with a good intention, and that intention is for tafannun, mixing up your style. You say, reported to me Abu Aisha. That's Abdurrahman's kunya. His name is Aisha, the oldest daughter, Mathalan. Or you say, reported to me Ibn Bilal. And Abdurrahman's father's name is Bilal. Or you say, reported to me Abu Aisha al-Ethiopi. And Abdurrahman is from Ethiopia. So you give him a different title, a different twist on his name, whether it's known or unknown. What's important is you're not lying. That is actual his name. He is Abu Aisha, he is Ibn Bilal, and he is al-Ethiopi, the Ethiopian. But he isn't known by that. He isn't what? He isn't known by that. So one may do this just for the purpose of tafannun fil ibarah, just to mix up the style and not to become bored. Or, as many people did, they may do this with the purpose of a ta'miyah, of hiding, or the purpose of making it difficult for someone to come behind them, covering their tracks. Scrambling the signal, you would say. Scrambling the signal. So, I didn't lie to you, that's his name. But who in the world knows him as Abu Aisha, the Ethiopian? Everyone knows him as Abdurrahman. Clear on this? And there are different reasons behind tadlis, all of its types. Some of those reasons are considered to be bad and negative. Sometimes some of them might even say evil. And some of those reasons are considered to be just makruh. And some of those reasons are not as bad. Some of those reasons were personal reasons why they made tadlis. Whatever the case may be. He says it's disliked. And it's not necessarily haram. The types of tadlis, as we mentioned before, there are many. Some of the ulama say there are 2, some say 3, some say more than that. But the main types are 2 to 3, as we previously explained. The first is that which is called tadlis al-isnad, and the second is that which is called tadlis al-shuyukh. And the third type, which many say is another main staple type, is that which is called tadlis at-taswiyah or at-tajweed. Now, tadlis al-isnad is for a person to narrate from a sheikh who is his sheikh. Abdurrahman actually heard from Abdul Latif. He's his teacher. But the day in which Sheikh Abdul Latif mentioned it's permissible to eat with one's left hand, he says. Sheikh Abdul Latif says it's permissible. It's just makruh, it's not haram. Abdurrahman wasn't at that class. He was sick that day. He had a bad stomach virus. So Abdurrahman, he hears about what Sheikh Abdul Latif said about eating with the left hand from brother Philip. That's his name, Philip. So when Abdurrahman goes to pass it on to his students or make a tweet or an email or a newsletter or a fa'idah, passes it on to someone else, he says, An Sheikh Abdul Latif, or An Abdul Latif, or Qala Abdul Latif. Abdul Latif said, or I'm narrating from him. And Abdurrahman doesn't mention that he didn't hear that from Abdul Latif directly. He heard from Philip, but he leaves Philip out. And he doesn't say, Sami'tu Abdul Latif. I heard Abdul Latif, because he said that he's lying, because he didn't hear him. Rather, Philip heard him, and Philip passed it on to him. the next morning or that night after class, Philip went to Abdurrahman's dorm room to visit him and to bring him some tea, some toast, and some oatmeal, مثلا, or some soup, some toast and bananas, مثلا, with regards to his stomach virus. Some burnt toast and some bananas to help him get his stomach back in order. So Philip brought him the things, and Abdurrahman says, what did Sheikh Abdul Latif talk about tonight? And he says he talked about eating with your left hand and that he believes it's not haram. And then Abdurrahman goes on to pass it on to his family members in Ethiopia in an email. But he didn't hear from Abdurrahman. He didn't hear from Abdul Latif, even though Abdul Latif is his Sheikh. قَدْ سَمِعَ مِنْهُ, he heard from him. Everybody clear on this? It's called Tadlis al-Isnad. Tadlis al-Shuyukh, we mentioned that just now. And we'll leave off the Tadlis al-Tasbiyah for now. Khairan inshallah. Point 13. Ibn al-Mulaqqin rahimahullah, he then says, والشاذ وهو ما روى الثقة مخالفا لرواية الثقات. بإذن ta'ala, hopefully in our next class we'll get to point 13 and explain it with a bit more detail and that which we explained it in Bayquniyah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surely knows best. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.